He stood at the altar, watching his bride walk toward him in that perfect white dress, her smile bright enough to light up the entire room. But his hands were shaking. Not from nervousness. Not from excitement. From heartbreak. Because less than 24 hours ago, he saw something that shattered his entire world. His bride, the woman he was about to vow forever to, tangled in the arms of his own brother. The brother he trusted. The brother he loved. And now, 300 guests were about to witness what happens when a man chooses truth over tradition. This isn't just a wedding story. This is a story about betrayal, courage, and a decision that would change everything. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Ethan Carter was the kind of man people called a good guy. Not because he was weak or passive, but because he genuinely cared. He was a contractor who built homes for families, spent his weekends coaching Little League, and never forgot his mother's birthday. At 32, he had worked hard for everything he had. A small construction business that was finally profitable, a modest house on the edge of town, and a love story he thought was written in the stars. That love story was named Rachel, and she was everything he thought he wanted. They met 5 years ago at a community fundraiser. She was volunteering at the registration table, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, laughing at something one of the organizers said. Ethan walked up to sign in, and when their eyes met, he swore time stopped. She had this warmth about her. This way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Their relationship wasn't easy at first. Rachel came from a family that struggled financially, and Ethan's business was barely breaking even back then. But they built something together. She helped him with bookkeeping when he couldn't afford an accountant. He supported her through night school when she went back to finish her degree. They talked about dreams over cheap takeout, planned their future in a cramped apartment that smelled like lavender candles and hope. Ethan's younger brother, Kyle, was a different story. Where Ethan was steady and reliable, Kyle was charming and reckless. He had that smile that made people forgive him too easily. That energy that lit up a room but often left chaos in its wake. Their parents had passed away years ago in a car accident, and Ethan had practically raised Kyle since he was 17. He bailed him out of trouble, lent him money he never expected back, and always believed Kyle would eventually find his way. When Ethan proposed to Rachel on a quiet beach at sunset, Kyle was the first person he called. His brother whooped with joy on the other end of the line, promising to be the best man, and joking about embarrassing speeches. Rachel seemed happy too. She said yes with tears streaming down her face. And Ethan felt like the luckiest man alive. But if you looked closely over the past few months, there were cracks. Small ones. The kind you don't notice until they've already split wide open. Rachel started working late more often, her phone always face down on the table. She'd laugh at texts she wouldn't let Ethan see, brushing it off as work drama or friend gossip. Kyle came around more frequently, always with some excuse, needing to borrow tools or asking for advice. But Ethan trusted them. Why wouldn't he? This was his future wife and his baby brother. The two people he loved most in the world. It happened the night before the rehearsal dinner. Ethan had been at a job site all day, pouring concrete for a new foundation in the summer heat. He was exhausted, covered in dust, and all he wanted was a cold shower and to collapse on the couch. He texted Rachel that he'd be home by 7, but finished early and decided to surprise her. Maybe they could grab dinner, talk through last-minute wedding details, just be together before the craziness of the weekend took over. He pulled into the driveway around 6:15. The house was quiet. Rachel's car was there, and so was Kyle's truck parked a little down the street. Ethan thought maybe they were going over best man speech details, or seating arrangements. He walked inside, calling out Rachel's name. No answer. Just the faint sound of music playing upstairs. Something in his gut twisted, but he pushed it down. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The bedroom door was cracked open, and what he saw through that narrow space destroyed him. Rachel and Kyle, wrapped around each other in the bed he shared with her. The bed where they'd talked about baby names and growing old together. They didn't see him. They were too lost in each other, too consumed by whatever this was between them. Ethan didn't burst in. He didn't scream or throw punches. He just stood there, frozen, his heart shattering into pieces so small he wasn't sure he'd ever be able to put them back together. He backed away silently, walking down the stairs like a ghost, and left the house. He drove for hours that night, no destination in mind. Just driving. Past the town limits, through back roads lined with cornfields, until he found himself at the cemetery where his parents were buried. He sat on the grass between their headstones and cried. How could they do this? How could the two people he loved most betray him like this? And what was he supposed to do now? The wedding was in 2 days. 300 people had RSVP'd. The venue was paid for. The flowers were ordered. His cousins were flying in from 3 states away. He could cancel everything. He could confront them, call it off, let everyone know what kind of people they really were. But as he sat there in the dark, something else took root in his chest. Not just anger. Not just pain. Clarity. If he canceled now, Rachel and Kyle would spin the story. They'd make excuses, play the victims, say it was a mistake or that he overreacted. People would take sides, and the truth would get muddy. But if he let the wedding go forward, if he stayed calm and played it smart, he could make sure everyone knew exactly what happened. He could take back the power they'd stolen from him. By the time the sun came up, Ethan had made his decision. The wedding would happen, but not the way anyone expected. The rehearsal dinner was torture. Ethan sat at the head table, smiling and shaking hands, while Rachel beamed beside him in a light blue dress. Kyle stood across the room, giving his speech about brotherhood and loyalty, and Ethan wanted to scream. But he didn't. He nodded along, laughed at the right moments, and kept his face neutral. Rachel kept glancing at him, her brow furrowed with concern. She knew something was off, but she couldn't figure out what. During a quiet moment, she leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay? You seem distracted." Ethan turned to her, looking into her eyes, the same eyes he'd once thought held his entire future. He smiled and said, "I'm perfect. Just thinking about tomorrow." She squeezed his hand, reassured, and went back to chatting with guests. Kyle avoided him most of the night, only approaching once to clink glasses and say something about how proud their parents would have been. Ethan wanted to throw the drink in his face. Instead, he just nodded and said, "Yeah, they would have." Later that night, back at the hotel, Ethan sat alone in his room and thought about what he was about to do. Was this the right move? Was revenge worth it, or would it just make everything worse? He thought about his parents, about how his dad used to say that integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's watching. But what was the right thing here? Letting them get away with it? Pretending it never happened? Ethan didn't think so. The right thing was the truth. And tomorrow, everyone was going to hear it. He barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them together. Every time he tried to push it away, the image came back sharper. By the time morning light crept through the curtains, he was exhausted. But he was also ready. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, warm sun, a light breeze that rustled the trees around the outdoor venue. Guests filled the white chairs, dressed in their best, chattering excitedly. Rachel was in the bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids, getting her hair and makeup done. Ethan stood in his tuxedo in a small room off to the side, adjusting his tie in the mirror. His hands were steady now. He wasn't nervous anymore. He was resolved. His best friend, Marcus, noticed the change. He walked over, clapped Ethan on the shoulder, and asked if he was ready. Ethan looked at him and said, "More than you know." Marcus laughed, assuming it was just pre-wedding jitters, and they headed toward the ceremony space. The music started. Guests stood. Rachel appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in her white gown, flowers in her hands, tears already welling in her eyes. She looked like a dream. But Ethan knew the truth behind that dream. He watched her walk toward him, each step bringing her closer to the moment that would define them both. When she reached the altar, she smiled at him. That same warm smile that had drawn him in 5 years ago. But this time, it didn't reach his heart. It just reminded him of everything she'd destroyed. The officiant began the ceremony with the standard opening, talking about love and commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Ethan barely heard the words. He was waiting for his moment. When it came time for the vows, the officiant turned to Ethan and asked if he had anything he'd like to say before they exchanged rings. Ethan nodded. He took a deep breath, looked out at the crowd of people who loved them, people who had no idea what was about to happen, and then he turned to Rachel. "I do have something to say," he began, his voice calm and clear. Rachel smiled, thinking it was going to be something sweet. But then Ethan continued. "I want to thank everyone for being here today, for taking time out of your lives to celebrate what we all thought was love, what we all believed was real." The crowd shifted slightly, confused. Rachel's smile faltered. "I also want to thank my brother, Kyle, for being here," Ethan said, his eyes finding Kyle in the front row. Kyle's face went pale. "For showing me exactly who the people closest to me really are." Gasps rippled through the guests. Rachel's eyes widened. "Ethan, what are you doing?" she whispered. "What I should have done the moment I found you in our bed with him," Ethan said, his voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "The night before our rehearsal dinner. In the home we were supposed to build together." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. Rachel's bouquet slipped from her hands, flowers scattering across the ground. Kyle stood up, his face red, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Ethan looked back at Rachel, and for the first time since he'd discovered the truth, he let himself feel the full weight of his grief. "I loved you. I gave you everything I had. And you chose him." He pulled the ring from his pocket, the one he was supposed to place on her finger, and set it gently on the altar. Then he looked at the crowd. "I'm sorry you all came here for nothing. But I couldn't let this lie continue. I couldn't stand up here and pretend everything was okay when it's not. Some things are unforgivable. And betrayal from the people you trust most? That's one of them." With that, Ethan turned and walked down the aisle, his shoulders back, his head high. The guests sat in stunned silence. Some were crying. Others were whispering furiously to each other. Rachel stood at the altar, frozen, tears streaming down her face. Kyle had already slipped out a side exit, unable to face the crowd. And Ethan? Ethan walked out into the sunlight, got into his car, and drove away from the life he thought he was going to have. 3 months later, Ethan was living in a small apartment 2 towns over. He'd sold the house, couldn't stand to be in it anymore, and started fresh. Work kept him busy, and he threw himself into creating something solid with his hands when everything else in his life had crumbled. He didn't talk to Kyle. His brother had tried to reach out, sent texts and voicemails that Ethan deleted without listening to. Some people said he should forgive, that family was family. But Ethan knew better. Forgiveness didn't mean letting people back in who would only hurt you again. Rachel tried to explain herself too. She sent a long letter, full of apologies and excuses about how it just happened, how she never meant to hurt him, how she was confused. Ethan read it once and then burned it. Not out of anger. Out of closure. He didn't need her explanations. He didn't need her regret. He needed to move forward. The truth was Ethan didn't regret what he did at the wedding. Some people thought it was too harsh, that he should have handled it privately. But for Ethan, it wasn't about revenge. It was about honesty. It was about refusing to live a lie, even when the truth was painful, even when it was humiliating. Because living with that secret would have eaten him alive, and marrying someone who betrayed him would have been a prison he could never escape. He started going to therapy, talking through the anger and the grief with someone who could help him process it all. He reconnected with old friends, the ones who'd supported him through everything. He even started dating again, cautiously, but with a clearer sense of what he wanted and what he deserved. And slowly, piece by piece, Ethan began to heal. Not because the pain went away, but because he chose not to let it define him. He chose to rebuild, to trust again, even if it was scary, to believe that not everyone would hurt him the way Rachel and Kyle had. One evening, Ethan stood on the porch of his new apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He thought about his parents, about how proud they'd be that he stood up for himself. He thought about the man he was becoming, stronger and more certain than he'd ever been before. And he realized something that changed everything. Betrayal hadn't destroyed him. It had redirected him. It had shown him that walking away from something toxic wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing he could do. Because sometimes, the people who break you are actually the ones who show you just how strong you really are. So here's my question for you. If you were in Ethan's position, What would you have done? Would you have confronted them privately? Or would you have done what he did and let the truth come out in front of everyone? Would you have been able to forgive? Or would you have walked away like he did? Think about it. Really think about it. Because betrayal doesn't just test your relationship with other people. It tests your relationship with yourself. It forces you to decide what you're willing to accept and what you're not. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about trust and honesty and courage, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's struggling to walk away from something that's hurting them. Because the truth is, walking away isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. It's choosing your peace. And sometimes, that's the most powerful choice you can make. If this story moved you, drop a comment and let us know what you would have done. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that make you think and feel and reflect, hit that subscribe button. Because next time, we're diving into something even more shocking. A bride who discovered her groom's secret just 1 hour before the ceremony. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself. See you in the next video.